I'm just going to take a look at ETH and Sol because I think they've both reached potential bounce levels. I'm not going to say that this is the bottom, but they are, I think maybe with this flush that we've seen this morning, we may be pretty close to a level where we could see a pretty decent bounce. And with ETH and Sol, that would actually be pretty good news for some of these altcoins that are seeing really, really nasty flushes. So the main thing I want to talk about today is a thing called a Marabou sea line. Thank you, Clive Lambert, years ago when I worked for him as an analyst, teaching me this. So let's start with Ethereum. So in Japanese candlesticks, when you have a really big thrust candle, like we had in November here in Ethereum post-election, and candles with relatively not very much or if any tails on them, then the midpoint, the halfway between the open and the closed, remember, don't measure the tail, between the open and the close, is called a Marabou sea line, and it works really well as a kind of midpoint support and resistance. And as long as you don't close and hold above it, the trend keeps going. So for example, back here in February we had a really big lovely thrust candle, Marabou candle. If I measure from the open until the close of this candle, you can see that the 50% of this candle was really good support and resistance. If I mark it, and we'll go back on, this is a weekly chart, so we're going to look at the daily and see how we reacted at this price. This is a monthly chart, sorry. So we're going to go back to the daily and see what we did back here at these prices. And you can see on the daily, look, we tagged it in April, we tagged it again in May, and it was still support where we double bottomed off it and had a really nice bounce off it in July. So these big monthly Marabou levels are a really big deal. Now, you don't always bounce that cleanly from them. Sometimes you can have a look well underneath and make quite a bit of a tail. But as long as you don't close the month underneath them, you know, they kind of stick. So for example, here we've got a really nice one where halfway back of this, we kept going, halfway back of this one, once we broke underneath it. First month, we pulled back, it was support and resistance. When we got underneath it, we kept going. And we could say here also about the bottom, here was our last big thrust candle down in this pullback that we had in August in ETH, and when we got above the 50% we kept going. So why am I pointing this out? Because we had this lovely thrust candle in November, and the level that we have price tagged today is the 50%. It's at 3,100, let's make sure I've put it on the open close, 3,111. So here on the daily, that's where we've reached. We're also almost back to the daily 200 moving average. So I'm not going to say that this is going to be a clean bounce level. We may look underneath it and close back above it, especially when I look left at the price action we had here in early November. But here off the lows so far, we're seeing a pretty nice reaction. And so potentially this could turn into a bigger bounce. And for me, when I look at the monthly candlesticks, we have not got a bearish reversal here unless we were to close and the month underneath 3011, and then we can say we've got a bigger double top and we're headed back to the lows at 2000 and the bottom of this sideways range in ETH. So potentially a bounce level. Just again, remember, we could have a look underneath this level. It's where we close the month, which of course it's the 20th. We've got another 10-11 days before that happens in Ethereum. And Solana, let's take a look at Solana. Solana's a very similar thing going on here. And Solana's a really good example if we look back at previous price action of what I mean about sometimes we'll spike it. So here we had a really nasty reversal in 2021. This is a monthly chart. And in January 2021, here's our really nasty downswing. Again, measure the open close. And you can see that 50% we didn't get back, we couldn't close and hold above it. So we continued in a downtrend in Solana and made another big swing low. And that's the open close, remember, of this candlestick, you don't count. But we did have a look above it. And so that's how it works. We could also say here, we had a big up, and then we had a nasty, you know, this is indecision, right? When you go all the way up and come all the way back, this is like not a trend, this is sideways. But we can see from this first candlestick, let's put in the 50%. Actually, let's go for the red one, most recent one. We had a bit of a fight over it for 2 months, and then we kind of washed through it, and then the level became support and resistance. So these Maribosi lines are effective. Here we had a pullback in January 2024 this year after a big upswing. Where did we find support on the pullback? It was 50% of the open close of this candlestick at 80 in Solana. Why is that important? Because if we were to bounce here in Solana and close back 50% of this candlestick that we have made, then we have not got the bearish reversal that we think it is. So if we think we are setting up a bounce here, which I think we could be in this market after a really nasty flush, I'm going to be looking at 203 in Solana to hold and get, sorry, let's mark it. I just want to mark it on my chart so I can take these lines off so I don't get confused later on. So 203, which was for me key support, 204, I think. 203, 204 is the level that we really need to get back above in Solana if we're going to keep going higher here on a bounce. So here we are underneath that level, and so whilst I don't see Solana as such a kind of clear, easy, straightforward bounce, you know, I kind of like where we are at this daily 20 moving average, but Solana hasn't been, you know, and it's previously been really good trendy support. It was really good trendy support where we pulled back off to it just before the election. I would like to see if we can close above this weekly 20 this weekend, then I think that we are likely to bounce back and potentially re-challenge this 203, 204, really key support and resistance level. The other thing I think why we might bounce here is if we measure this whole swing, here we are kind of sideways, 50% retrace then of this whole rally. Weekly 20 moving average, it is kind of one of those levels where we could attempt a bounce. So for me, ETH is really clear and Solana's a maybe, and if they can rally here, Solana has been underperforming a bit, but if they can, this would be a little bit of a relief bounce for those alts. And I really, you know, there's nothing worse than selling the lows and getting shaken out and then watching it rip back up in your face. If you're stuck in it, you kind of need a bounce to see, you know, it's not very good psychologically, that's all I'm saying. And this is why I'm always like, if we get a really good spike or we hit a really good level, it's really good to take some profit, because it really helps your psychology when you're looking at really nasty shakeouts like this. Because if you've taken a bunch of profit out, you want to put that money back to work, and you're looking at these pullback bets for opportunities rather than kind of groaning and not wanting to look or looking away. So really decent level for Ethereum, and looking to see if Solana can do the same. Good luck.